Hello, welcome back to Machynlleth. In this video I'm going to be making the up platform waiting shelter for Machynlleth station. Predominantly it's going to be made out of plasticard. I'll show you how I use this material. And it's going to need some laser cut windows and a corrugated iron roof as well. So we'll move on. I'll show you a mock-up of the building that I've made out of card. And we'll have a look at some photos of what I'm trying to achieve in real life. Right, these are pictures from C.C. Green's Coastlines of the Cambrian Railways book, which is my go-to Bible really for photos. Most of them are, say, a little bit late, mainly in the 1960s, but I think the building itself structure hasn't changed too much. So that's the platform elevation, and this is the rear elevation. As you can see, it's set on a sort of stone buttress, raising it up from quite a steep embankment off the back of the platform. There's a path leading down to the Carcass railway on this east side elevation. I was lucky enough to go and take measurements of this building. I think it's been slightly rebuilt and altered since these pictures were taken in 1965, but it gives me the general dimensions. So I've made a cardboard mock-up of the building sitting on its buttress. I used this just out of Daler mount board. There's the sort of the platform elevation. Out of Daler mount board on my laser cutter, and we can use that as a template for the final building. I prefer to use plasticard when I'm trying to represent wooden slats. I tried printing, laser cutting into card to represent this, but I don't like the corners. It's very difficult to get the corners right, and I just feel that using a scribing tool in plasticard just gives it a little bit more of a little bit more definition, a slightly wider scribing marks than if you're using a laser cutter on its own. So this is 30 thou plasticard, and first job is I'm going to scribe the wooden slats into that, and then I can cut the elevations out of that scribed area rather than scribing each elevation individually. Firstly, usually there's usually a shiny and a matte side, and I prefer to use the matte side. Gives you a better key for painting later on. And the next thing I need to do is just make sure, because it usually isn't the case, actually that's not too bad. Often sheets that you get aren't entirely square, so if you start working off something that's not square, the rest of the building is going to be wrong. So the wooden slats are about 6 inches high, so I'm just going to set a pair of dividers. 6 inches in 4mm scale is 2mm, so I'm just going to set a pair of dividers at 2mm. I'm going to use the dividers to make, if we get that started bang on the edge, we'll make a little mark there and walk this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there will be, probably can't see it, tiny little indentations there. And we'll do it at the other end of the card as well. So we just now need to join these up. You can usually, with a nice sharp pencil, you can then line your ruler up into the little holes that you've made, if you can see them. So you drop your scriber, just a plain scriber, into the little holes that you've made. You can scribe so just to give you a little bit of a close-up view of what I've done there, you can see the little holes made by the dividers at each end, and to focus, some nicely scribed parallel lines. I'm going to wipe that down now, get rid of the original markings before we get on to mark out our sides. I've marked out the dimensions of all the apertures, the doors and the windows and the gaps between them on my card mock-up. I'm going to transfer all those measurements onto our slatted plasticard. So the door there is 20 millimeters, 11 millimeters away from the end, and it goes up 13 slats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We'll make a line across the top there along the slat, and using a set square. Mark out the door. Working from the other end, the door is 10 millimeters away from the end. It is 12 millimeters wide. Nope, it is 12 millimeters wide. Then it's another 10 millimeters to the edge of the window. The windows are 24 millimeters. The gap is 10 millimeters, and another window of 24 millimeters. So the bottom of the windows are 5 slats up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's draw a line across there. The top of the windows is a further 8. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. Draw a line. Yes, I've just remeasured that and it's 9. So that's the top of the windows. The top of the door again is 13, so we use that one there. Now we use our set square to mark out the verticals. There we have some crosses so we know which bits we're cutting out and don't get confused with. There's our front elevation ready to be cut out. So we'll look at the side now. This is the side elevation. We'll need 2 of these. So that is 10 foot wide, which is 40 millimeters. I'll leave a little gap. And we need 2 of these. So marking that as 40, and we'll make 2 marks as well, halfway to give us our apex. Not quite straight, it's not. And then our apex will be up there somewhere. The apex, we'll measure that, is 48 millimeters off the base. So that is our apex point. This is our apex point, and of course we're going to need to do a little bit more scribing. There we are. While I'm at it, actually, I'm going to make, because I'll need a former for the roof on the inside surface, so we'll do another one of those, but that doesn't need to have the slats scribed all the way to the top. It is visible. Right, so as we can see, there's a window on the end here. If I remember rightly, that's 18 by 18, the same height as these. So if we take this slat across there, that's an easy measurement. Take the centre line, measure. We want an 18 wide window, so 9 either side. And that slat across there. So there we are. So we've got front elevation and two ends. I need to do the rear elevation. I don't think I need to record that. It's just simply repeating the process that we've used on those ones again. Right, so I've scribed and marked out the rear elevation. So we've got front and rear elevation, two ends, and a former support piece for the centre. The rear elevations are going to butt onto the front elevations. So if I put that former in the centre of the building, it was marked out the same width of those. So I've just marked off the width of the 30 thou plasticard, make it slightly narrower, otherwise we would end up with a bow in the middle of the building where that was placed in there. So the next job is to remove all these windows and door holes, and the way I do that is I scribe round them first before making a cut. One, it makes sure that your scalpel stays in a straight line because it follows the guide of the scribe. And two, if you cut a piece of plasticard directly with a knife, you don't get a nice cut like that. It burrs the edges up on either side of the cut. Whereas I find if you scribe that first, you don't get this burring. You get a nice clean cut. Oh, this is the tricky bit because it's very easy to go too far. So that's all the apertures scribed. Now we can start making some cuts. And cut lots of shallow cuts rather than one deep cut. And because we've made the scribes, it's much less likely that the knife is going to wander off. Right. So they should just pop out now. ends. Knife. Can all go. You probably find that in the corners, don't know if you can see, there's just tiny little bits where the cuts don't quite go to the edge, so you can just with your blade just pick them out, make the corners nice and square. Right, so these should all now just pop out. A little bend. And there we are, we've got all the pieces that we need. Right, so here are the main parts for the carcass of the building. We've got front, rear, two ends, and I've decided to make a second internal partition wall. I think we'll probably have one there and one around there, so there's a central compartment which probably isn't open to the public, if I remember rightly, on my visit to the station a few years ago. So I've marked out a second partition wall with just a plain door in the middle. That will almost certainly never get seen because it's going to be on the inside of the building, facing away from the viewing side of the layout, but it just makes me feel better that there's a door going into that compartment. At least I know that it's there. So we can now start to put this together. Right, we can start gluing together now. So I've cut out a number of these tiny little right angle triangles which I'm going to use to support the corners and make sure everything goes together square. I've also made two vertical lines where the internal partitions are going to go. So if we start off with one end, these little triangles are going to be tucked up right in the corner, top corner, and never get seen. Using plastic magic, nothing revolutionary there. So we can just start getting gluing. Right, I'm going to put a piece of paper underneath this, simply to stop the plastic magic bleeding through the cracks and damaging the scribed surface on the outside. There we are. So I've just got a piece of coloured Taylor mount board there. Offer that up. So I'm trying to do the tricky left hand end first. I might use this just to put this up into place. Run some plastic magic. And there we are, the external side of the carcass. You can see there is Focus on that. A bit of an overlap, but once that's all dry and firmed up, we'll disguise that. So we're going to cut the windows out of this stuff, which is called polyback. It's a type of wax impregnated card. It's 0.4 millimeters thick, so ideal for things like window frames. The wax impregnation makes it behave more like a plastic, although it doesn't melt. You can still cut it well with the laser cutter. It takes paint very well. It doesn't absorb paint and curl and expand. So it's an ideal material to use in the laser cutter for finer details. So the laser cutter's finished its job there. You can see the window with the backing around it. That has taken about 10 minutes to cut 8 windows. And the design time, if I hadn't been trying to record it, I'd probably knock those designs up in about 5 to 10 minutes. So there you go, I've got 8 windows and it's taken me somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. I don't think you'd be able to accurately cut out these windows using a traditional scalpel. So this has definitely been a game changer for me. So those are our windows cut. You might be wondering why I've cut such a wide surround for it, so that, as you can see, this is quite a flimsy structure at the moment. So we can cut these window shapes to fit as a complete layer on the inside of this external layer, and then there will be a layer of glazing between that, and then we'll have a layer of tongue and groove detail on the inside of that. So as a total it'll have 4 layers, which will give it a lot more stiffness and be a lot more robust. So the next thing to do is to measure up and cut out the window layers so that they fit nicely into the window apertures. Right, some of the eagle-eyed of you will notice I put the windows at the wrong end, so I've just taken off this rear aspect and redone it with the windows at the correct end. I've also filed down, sanded down these joints here, and now with a triangular shaped file we'll just find the groove and extend the groove. And this is why I don't laser cut the actual outline. So with that done, it's time to give it a coat of paint. So I'm going to go and prime that with a white primer and get a coat of Precision Paints Light Stone on the outside and some of the inside surfaces that are going to be visible. So while the primer is drying on the main carcass, I primed the window pieces earlier, and I've measured them up so that they fit on the internal surface of the main building. So we'll just simply cut these to shape now. So I've saved you all from watching a video on paint drying. As you can see, I've applied some paint to this. I've used precision paints, Lightstone number 1 and dark stone number 3. But I have I add a little bit of white to it just to lighten it up, give it a bit of sun fading. The colours as they come are a little bit intense. And the other thing that I tend to do when I'm using enamels is after the sort of the shine has gone off, as they start to dry, I with a nice soft fluffy brush just dab talcum powder over it, which gives it a nice matte finish but also makes it easier to handle a bit quicker. So that's what I've done to the main carcass, and I've also printed off some laser cut some internal laminates. We're going to be creating a sandwich next, so the next thing to go in will be, I've cut these out now to size, will be the window layer, window frame layer, followed by a layer of acetate for the glass, and then a layer of this on the internal surface, and hopefully that will give it a bit more rigidity. So having cut these to size, I'm now going to make a lamination with the frame on the outside, a piece of acetate in the middle, and the inside final surface on the inside there, and then that will fit in there. So the frame is sitting behind the outside surface, but if we look through what will be an open door on this surface, or through some fairly large windows, the internal surface will look convincing as well. So I'm making this lamination using Evo Stick impact adhesive because it sticks nicely to card and plastic, and you get a little bit of time to so we've got our layer of acetate on there. And our internal surface on there. So we've glued together all those laminations now, and you can see all the window frames are in place. In the end there, and the rear elevation, and you can also see that inside we've got some detail as well. So I've just cut out using some plasticard. Don't ask me what thickness this is. It looks like it's about 1 millimetre thick. I don't know what that is in thou. With about a 2 millimetre overhang to form the roof, and these are just little strengtheners, if I can pick one up, which are of the same profile as the hip of the roof. So we just need to glue these together now using our trusty plastic magic. A bit of a fiddle. So I'll glue the formers onto one side, allow that to dry, and then glue the formers. Obviously you need to make sure you don't put a former where there's going to be an internal wall. So the roof in the prototype is corrugated iron painted black. I've got this lovely stuff, I've been using this stuff for years, which is little sheets of pre-corrugated nice thin aluminium made by a company called Ambis Engineering. It's a delight to work with and a delight to model with and paint and weather. Get some beautiful effects with it. It's very easy to cut. You can just cut it with a scalpel. So I'm going to measure up what we need, and I'll cut out the little sheets and we'll glue them onto the roof. So after a bit of maths I worked out that I need to cut them into panels 15 millimeters wide. So as I said, it's quite easy stuff to cut. I've marked this up, I don't know whether you can see because it's a bit reflective, just using a fine liner pen, and as I say, it just cuts quite nicely with a scalpel. Just a couple of passes and then a little flex, and then you've got your panels. So I've cut out the required 28 sheets of corrugated iron. I've worked out and marked out that each one needs to overlap, making the visible surface about 11 millimeters wide. My preferred glue of choice for this is good old Evo stick. So put a good amount on there. I'll just do it part at a time, otherwise it dries too quickly. So with a slight overlap for the end. There's our first one on. just put a little bit down the side here on the overlap, otherwise they do tend to pop up a little bit. And we'll carry on down like that. Right, so all the corrugated iron sheets are now in place, nice and shiny. And now I need to create sort of a ridge tile. It's not really a tile, it's more a sheet of metal that goes along the top of the ridge of the roof. I'm going to be using 0.01 by 100 evergreen strip to do that. I've cut a couple of pieces off already. I think this will be very fiddly to do on camera. I don't think you'll get to see very much of it, so I'll just crack on and I'll show you what it's done like when it's done, but that's what we're aiming to do across the top there. So that went together quite a lot better than I thought it would, easier. I just with a little bead of very stick along the ridge, and then ease the plasticard strip into place, and I'm just going to run a little bead of poly cement along the apex there, just to make sure that those two pieces bond together and a good point at the apex. And that's the majority of the building done. It just really remains to do the guttering. So there we are, that's how we're looking now. There's a coat of primer, black primer on there. It's a bit shiny, it hasn't got brilliant coverage into the little gaps there. I don't want to put any more on, otherwise it will start sort of looking a bit thick. It's not the final colour I want anyway. I'm going to be using, first off I'm going to paint the ridge tiles, well they're not really tiles, the ridge don't know how to describe it really, with this Vallejo grey, and then the black of the corrugated iron. I'm going to paint in this very old says World War I German uniform shadow, but it's a nice sort of almost black but with a bit of faded sort of grey to it, and that looks quite nice. Yeah, so mixing in a bit of white with that. I'll give it a go with that. Get most of that off. This looks more like it. Hopefully that'll look a bit like a galvanized steel effect once it's dry. Right, so now we can put a layer of this ancient German uniform shadow on the black. So the roof's got its coat of matte, almost black, and I think it looks much better than that, like that. I'm going to give it a little bit of weathering to highlight it, which is where this corrugated plastic's lovely stuff to work with. Just gentle, light. Light strokes. As I was saying earlier, you know, about weathering, always weather vertically. Well, this is probably the exception that makes the rule. If you weather vertically, your paint wouldn't catch the corrugations and highlight them. A little bit much there, rub it back with a finger. And then bringing out the detail beautifully there. Right, I'm just going to put some very light rust effects on here. These are my go-to colours for rust effects. So Tamiya XF64, Tamiya XF68 and Revel 85 Brown. So I tend to start with the darker of the colours, so that's 64. And we're just going to very, very lightly, we don't want much on here at all. Down towards the bottom end. Maybe a little bit more than that. And not on every sheet either. Not sure how well you can see that. That's better. So that's one side, and then we'll just pick that up with a slightly different brown, slightly lighter this time, a bit more orangey. Just in the same areas that we've been before. And then finally we'll have some of our, and this is really orange, so you go very, very sparingly with this. And there we are, that's the finished effect. Very satisfying to do. So really the last significant job to do on this now is the guttering. So we've got some, if I'll focus on that, some Slater's half round plastic strip, 2.5mm, and it's just some evergreen strip as a backing sort of barge board that it will rest on. So we need to measure, where's my pen, measure the length of guttering, so there's one for each side. And we'll get this, we'll measure this not to the length of the roof, but to the length of the building. So we'll cut 2 pieces off there. It should be a relatively simple job. I'll find some tweezers. Just cementing. Here, just make sure the overlap each end is about the same. So if we just hold that in place, stay still, let some cement run into that, and we'll work our way down there. So we end up with something like that, if you can see it, and then that will fit nicely along there. Turn this around so you can see it the right way up, along there, under the eaves of our roof. Right, so we'll now make the downpipes. So this is what I use for downpipes, which is just florist's wire. It's approximately 1mm in diameter, which would make it a scale 3 inches, which is ideal for downpipes. I'm just going to trim the end off to give it a little file so that it is a bit squarer on the end here. Our downpipe is going to go from here, and then it goes down and then around this corner before going down the side of the building, which is going to make life a little bit tricky. So just using some pliers really, just to bend it where we want it. So it comes down there. And then we'll have a bend to get it round the corner. I'll cut that a bit shorter before I poke my eye out with it. So where are we going? Bend to get it around the corner. So that's where we are now. And a bend to get it back to the vertical. So if you can see that that's what we've been aiming for, and that's what's prototypical on this building. So I'm just going to cut that down to length because it's a bit longer than we need. And what I tend to do with these is file them to an angle, a 45-degree angle, in the direction that you want the spout to go. Wasn't quite right, was it? That way. And then just make sure we're going the right way. Give it a little tweak out. So, not sure if you can see. That's what we're aiming for. And now we need to put some little clasps, if you like, onto the pipe to hold it in position. Clasps that I use to attach it, I'm just using a piece of this off-cut evergreen strip and just cut little sections of it like that, like about 1 millimetre wide. Oops. And cut more than you will need because they disappear very quickly. So I gave up trying to video that for you. It's all far too fiddly and all stuck to myself, but that's what I've ended up with. That focuses. And now I'm just going to drill a tiny hole in the end of the guttering. Okay, so while that was drying, I've just cut up some barge boards for the end of the roof. Just need to go off, get this sprayed now. There is a downpipe on the rear aspect, but I'm going to add that later because it actually it extends down below the level of the building on along the side of the base, which is the next thing we're going to go on to make. That's got some concrete areas, some brick areas and some stone areas, and we're scribing the stone out of DAS modelling clay. Okay, so I'll come back when these are all painted up and we'll fit them on the building. So here we are. As promised, the roof is on temporarily, guttering is in place. This is the side that faces away from us on the layout, the platform side. And this is the side that you're actually going to see on the layout. Okay, so the next job, with that more or less finished, is to concentrate on the base. This is a cardboard outline I made of it. I didn't film it because it was quite complicated, you know, a bit of a trial and error job. And cut this out on the laser cutter. This funny profile here is to fit over the edge of the platform. This unusual square section for some reason is brick, whereas the rest of these sloping section is rough stone, and then there's a concrete pad around the top surface which we need to replicate. So I'll be replicating that, cladding the top surface with some plasticard, concealing the joints. This surface will be some Slater's embossed brick, and then we'll coat the rest of it with Das clay and scribe the stone effect into that before painting it all up. So I'll just cut out some pieces of plasticard, and we're going to glue them and cut them to size and glue them on using our faithful Evo stick. It's my choice when going from plastic to another medium, seems to be the best thing. I'll come back when I've done that. You don't need to see me do that, it's not rocket science. So they're glued on now. There's a bit of overlap. It's better to have a little bit of overlap than to have a piece where there's a gap. As I say, there are a few gaps. We'll get some filler in there just to make sure this all sticks together nicely. I'm just going to put a little bit of poly cement into the joins here. And then when that's gone off, we'll have a bit of filler, let that dry, file that back smooth so it looks like a single concrete pad. So the next thing to do is to clad this corner in brick. So we're using good old-fashioned Slater's embossed brick plasticard. I've marked these out. Now when you're making a corner, it's important to make your corner cuts line up with the courses of the bricks. You don't want like a third of a brick on a corner. You want either half or full bricks. So I've marked these out such that I can make the corner, and then if I need to trim it back, I'll trim it back on this edge, which is going to be hidden rather than the corner. Now, if I was to just butt these two together, you'd obviously see the end of one side. So we need to chamfer this side and that side back at 45 degrees. The way I do tend to do this is I'm going to move the camera over because you won't be able to see it, because I use the edge of the table is to just get the brick on the reverse side. Just hold it in place. This ruler's actually got a nice piece of cork on the back that grips it well. So you've just got it over the edge of the table there, and then just use the flat of a blade and scrape away at a 45-degree angle. Makes a lot of mess. Don't do it in the living room. I do a lot of this stuff that's now, I don't know, you probably won't be able to see, but that's now a nice edge there. And I'll do the same on the other side. The other thing to mention is just make sure that your bricks are lining up. So you've got half a brick on one side and a full brick on the other side, and they're not. But actually it's not going to make too much difference because I can just offset them, because the bottom of these is going to be buried in the scenery, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't reach the bottom of the base. There we are. Now if I put those two bits together, they come together as a nice point, and you don't see the edge of the opposite piece. So I've now trimmed these to shape and offset by a brick, so that we've got half a brick on one side corresponding with a whole brick on the other side, and vice versa, alternating all the way down as it would be in real life. There's nothing bugs me in a close-up photo of a building, and you've either got a big chunk of plasticard showing out, plain plasticard showing on one side because it's just a butt joint, or the bricks don't line up. So we'll glue this in place now just with my usual Evo stick. So we've got a lovely sharp edge there, the bricks are all lined up, and just to reinforce that, because the glue is stuck to the back of the surface, so if we just run a bead of cement into the corner joint there, just push them together. I tend to just use the flat of a ruler just to, don't use your fingers, you just leave fingerprints. And that should bond nicely. We can tidy that up once it's dry. So now these joints up here are dry, we'll fill these gaps and file them back. So I'm just using a standard modelling filler. You squirt a little bit out onto a card, just got a piece of card, and then you can use anything you like really. You can use an old blade here. I'm just going to force it into these gaps here. And give that a little while to dry, and we'll sand that back with a bit of fine wet and dry. So I've finished the concrete hard standing pad, filed the edges off, so it's got a nice smooth edge to it, and now we need to coat this with Das clay to scribe the stonework into it. So this is the fun bit. This is my trusty pasta roller. This is my pasta roller. I haven't stolen it out of the kitchen. I'm not going to get into trouble for this. So I've just got a piece of Das clay here. We'll start off in a fairly wide setting and just push it through, and we've got a nice flat piece coming out there. So make this setting a little bit thinner, so on until we've got it about 1 millimetre, and I've found that usually about number 3 seems to get it about the right sort of thickness. So there we are, got a lovely thin piece of das there. Just size it up for where you want to put it on. That looks about the right sort of size, so I'm going to just make a cut to get a nice smooth top edge. And that is going to fit on there and go around the corner nicely. So we've got some bog standard PVA here, and just a cheap paste brush. Don't want too much on this, don't need it too thick, just a light layer. Very thin like that. And the edge there, and I'm going to get it into this area here by the brickwork, and then simply pop it into place, press it down. Just use your fingers to fill up any gaps, imperfections. And then I'm just going to use a ruler just to get the corners. I'm going to try and get these corners nice and square, just a little bit of moisture, and then just using this steel rule as a sort of spatula. Let's cut this floppy bit off the bottom. Bit of excess. Wouldn't worry too much about the edges here, because these are going to get covered in scenery down the line anyway. So just a little bit of moisture on the corner here, and I can just use what I am going to do similarly is just create a little bit of shoulder. And the prototype, there's a slight shoulder at the top. There we are. So that's one surface done. That's quite nice. So I'm not too worried about these bits around the corner. They're going to be buried in the scenery. I'll just use a little offcut to do this bit on the corner. Or PVA. So too much PVA is not your friend here. It just makes it so slippery. It doesn't stick down very well. So and make a little shoulder. Bit of moisture on the edge. Just cut off the excess. There we go. So, just going to leave that now to dry. I'm going to go off to the shops and we'll come back a bit later on and we can start scribing the stonework in. So it's about 2 hours later. This has been sitting on the radiator for that time and it's all perfectly hard, ready for me to start scribing. So I'm using this little tool. I've had it for years. It came out of a set that the kids had for scribing pictures on a black sheet of metal, I think it was. But it's an ideal little pen. I've just got a bit of tape around there so it's a little bit easier on your fingers. But as you can see, it's got a sort of an almond shaped blade there, which is ideal for scribing. So we're just going to start just roughly and randomly scribing into the clay here. Doesn't show up much. I'll get a little brush. So and I have to say, honestly, it doesn't look like much at the moment, but once we start putting a bit of paint on this, it'll start looking like stone. So this is probably going to take me an hour or so. Don't know how much you can see of that. This corner here. But once we get some paint on there, that'll come up nicely. So that's the scribing finished. I haven't gone all the way down to the bottom because that's going to be concealed by scenery. That would be a huge waste of time. So now I need to put a little bit of paint on this. So I'm going to start off with an undercoat in a concrete colour. So B&Q tester pot called warm cement. Makes a nice mortar stroke concrete colour as a base. So This is what I use as a base. It's as I say, B&Q's emulsion tester pot called warm cement. I'll start getting a bit of this on. Hopefully it'll start bringing out a little bit of the detail. Might be a bit easier to see on camera. Don't worry if I'm going on to the brickwork too much. And nice fine layer, nice and fine, so we don't leave too much in the way of brush strokes. So I've got a selection here of tester pots from B&Q in the Valspar range of various sort of stony grey colours that I use for blending and dry brushing my stonework. So starting off with the darkest one, I've got Battlefield, Gotham City, Elephant in the Room, Sleepy Kitten, Stone Age and Weathered Cottage. And I tend to start off with the darker colours and then work my way up to the lighter colours on a dry brush on the surface to catch the sort of the light catching on the surfaces of the stone. So that's got 2 coats of warm cement on, and now I'm going to start dry brushing the darkest of those colours, which was Battlefield. Now it's got a bit over the top, this paint. It's been around a while. You should start seeing a stone effect coming out very quickly. You don't really have to wait for the cement layer to dry before starting this. It doesn't matter if it mixes in a little bit. In fact, it can improve the blending. So I'm brushing in a diagonal way. If you brush horizontally, the paint is going to end up in the mortar layers. So if you brush diagonally, you sort of get into some of the mortar layers, but not too deep. So that will probably do for our darkest layer. Might miss out Gotham City. Go for Elephant in the Room next. This is Elephant in the Room. And again, doesn't really matter if the bottom layer is not dry, and tend to do this in a slightly more patchy way rather than catching every single stone. Next one, my favourite actually, is Sleepy Kitten. I used a lot of this in the layout so far for rock and stone work. That's that sort of colour. Again, dabbing this just random spots. And there we are. that's the effect we're ending up with. Hope that comes out. Right, so moving away from our B&Q paint sponsorship deal, I'm going to start on the brickwork. We're using some Tamiya XF68, XF64, the Revel Brown 85. I use a little bit of the German uniform, and I'm going to use some flesh colours. Yes, this must seem very, very light from brick, but just trust me, and we'll see where we end up with that. So we need a base coat. Start with the darkest colour first, which is XF64. I have given these a good shake before starting this actually, so you think I'm not bothering to shake with paints. And we just want a coverage over the whole of this. Probably got a bit thick there. Right, that's touch dry now, so I'll have a bit of XF68, which is a similar rusty brown colour. Doesn't bring out a massive effect straight away. We just dab that on. Now we'll get a little bit of our German uniform shadow. So it's again a dark grey, blacky colour, and again not everywhere. Just little patches. This one is quite bright. This is the Revel. It says brown, but it comes out almost orange. And actually, by the time I've got my dirty brush in there, it's even darker. It's a rather unlikely flesh colour. Now, I've changed to a much smaller brush, and as you can see, the width of that brush is almost exactly the same as the width of a brick, and then we can just pick out sort of individual bricks. Even that's probably a little much. Orangey brown. Right, it's bled over there, that's no problem. That'll disappear once we get the mortar lines in place. Right, so the final stage, we're going to add the mortar layer. So we're back to our warm cement colour. I've also got a bit of just very fine pre-mix household filler. I'm not going to need much for that, much for this at all. So this is just, you know, decorating filler. So we'll get a little bit of our warm warm cement paint and mix that in nicely. Now we're going to create a type of wash. Now I'm just using the water that I've been washing my brushes in. So I want that nice and watery. Work fairly quickly with this. So I'm going to brush this all over the brickwork. And with a nice clean bit of kitchen towel, I'm going to dab that, and then with a finger, because the kitchen towel is a little bit too absorbent, it sucks the paint off the brickwork. Just going to get that. And that is now going to settle into all the mortar lines. We'll leave that to dry. So that's had a bit of time to dry now. The stone effect is good, the mortar settled into the brickwork, and you can see it's just sort of brought out a slight randomness to the brick effect. So the last thing that remains for me to do is the guttering down the right hand side, and a couple of notice boards on the front, and I think we're more or less done. Here's the finished waiting room sitting on its plinth. You can see how the plinth is buried into the embankment. I still haven't put the downpipe on the right hand end there, but at the moment it's just sitting on that plinth. I'm not going to stick it down permanently until I've done some more work on the back of the layout. I don't want to be leaning over it and damaging it. You can see how the path comes down from the platform. There's a little dog leg between the waiting room and the weighbridge building, and down into the lower yard. And other videos I'm going to be doing making this embankment, and watch out, I'm going to be making that on video as well.